Alrighty, hi everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Please, if you're a participant, please do just mute yourselves. That way we can minimize some of the noise. Alrighty, let me see. Make sure I got my settings together. Ashley, I think you're logged in on the second one. Can you mute that one? Are you logged in on the second one? Let's see.
No, I'm only logged in on one device.
Okay, got it. Alrighty, perfect. Oh, okay, there we go. Sorry, there we go. Can you hear me now? Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Denise Morales. I am the Community Initiatives Manager for Fifth Ward Community Redevelopment Corporation, a nonprofit operating in Fifth Ward for over 30 years. I get to do all the fun stuff with community members, like bringing such events as today's event, loteria events, or back to school drives, health fairs, everything and anything. I run a resident-led project and initiative that really allows community members to feel heard and seen in the community and do something about it. I want to go ahead and allow Ashley to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I am the Community Health Coordinator and Council Organizer for Center for Urban Transformation. So we focus on the domains of the social determinants of health and allow community members to have their voice in projects that they would like to see in their community, specifically Fifth Ward.
So just around May, we're thinking about mental health and mental health awareness and what does that look like? What does that mean? And it's also very important as we do community work for us to understand some of the things our community members are going through. And this is where Ashley and I started collaborating a couple months ago, and we're like, we want to do a panel. We're not sure how we're going to go about it, but let's see what we can cook. And so we came up with the Fifth Ward Let's Heal a Mental Health discussion. And so we have people here who are really the experts on the ground, have seen it in their personal lives, and are helping individuals really get through what it means to heal and some of these traumas. And so definitely want to give you a platform for that. But is there anything you would like to add, Ashley?
Nothing specifically. I am just excited that we were able to organize this, and I'm ready to get started.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and allow the panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Amanda.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Amanda Garza, and I am a licensed professional counselor associate with Ajana Therapy. So what that means is that I've completed my training and I am currently working towards my hours, 3,000, to become a fully licensed counselor. I have been in the mental health field for about 10 years now, working with people of all ages and from a diverse background. And currently I work a lot with codependency, a lot of relationship issues, not just romantic, but also if you've come from a dysfunctional family, then maybe you have some troubles with recognizing boundaries and how to set them. So I do a lot of work with that and a lot of work with the LGBTQ community.
Thank you, Amanda. Camila?
Good morning, everyone. I am Camila Thomas. I'm a licensed clinical social work supervisor. I'm also a psychotherapist and the CEO and clinical director of KBT, Counseling and Consulting. We are a group practice here in Houston, Texas, really specializing on destigmatizing mental health in communities of color. I've been in the field for about 17 years now. Kind of started off my career working in juvenile justice and foster care, and since getting my master's about 13 years ago now, really working with adults in private practice, really specializing in professional Black women, perfectionism, high functioning, anxiety, and really just helping people get out of their own way.
Thank you, Camila. Sine?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sine Pierre. I'm founder and president of a nonprofit organization called Society of Royals, and that's just to bring awareness and prevention for youth suicide. So thank you guys for having me here today.
Thank you, Sine. Alrighty, so Ashley's gonna go ahead and be our main host and leading the discussions today. I hope that you are all able to listen and really get to see what this is all about.
Okay, yes. So before we get started, I do see that someone started screen sharing. Miss Lisa, if you don't mind unsharing your screen, thank you. All righty. So we're gonna go ahead and jump right into it. We're gonna go into the order of Miss Amanda first, Miss Camilla, and then Miss Sine, I'm sorry. So that's gonna be the order that we're going to answer these questions, okay? Perfect. So the first question for our mental health discussion is, how do you relate to the discussion topic?
In my own personal life, I grew up experiencing racism in a small town. There wasn't a lot of opportunities. And also, when we tie in generational trauma, my parents, they speak Spanish, but they didn't pass down the language to me and my siblings because of the fact that growing up, they were hit with rulers and, you know, they had their language taken from them. And so they were like, it's just easier if you don't know the language, that way you can fit in more. And then also just growing up through the pandemic, well, not growing up, but being in a pandemic, growing up in a lot of hurricanes where there's a lot of collective trauma from that. Yeah, I think those are just the ways that I relate to it in my own personal life. And then also being from a low income household and where we don't really talk about things like mental health. And then professionally, I work with a lot of clients that have experienced trauma, whether it's generational trauma or something that occurred to them growing up or in their current life. It's something that we tend to see a lot of, especially after the pandemic. We all now have this collective trauma that we're trying to figure out, how do we heal from this? How do we work with this? How do we deal with it?
Yeah, I think for me, just being someone who identifies as a Black American in the United States, that in itself exposes me to a lot of different trauma, whether that's directly, indirectly, or systemically. Personally, I've had my unfortunate share of, you know, some traumas. And then professionally, I've, you know, really helping clients with a variety of traumatic experiences, similar to what Amanda said, whether it's the impact of the pandemic, sexual abuse, physical abuse. It could be trauma experienced in the workforce. It could be colorism. It could be texturism. So I think trauma shows up differently for a lot of different people.
Yeah, so my experience and why I started the organization is because in 2008, I had a mentee that took her life. And I took that very hard, but I really couldn't express it because once I tried to, I was just told, oh, you know, just breathe right now or grieve right now, sorry, and then just get over it pretty much. So I took it really hard because I felt like I could have done more to help her, because she would say it all the time. And this particular day I was like, oh, you know, just let her have time to herself and she'll come around and all this other stuff. But this time she actually did it. And then about a year and 6 months later, one of my coworkers, she took her life. So I was like, oh Lord, like I'm not going through this again. So that was the gateway of me to really just like open up, go through counseling, speak to someone professionally. And that's what made me want to start the organization for our youth, and a way for me to turn my pain into purpose, because in our community, we're told, whatever goes on in his house stays in his house, or, you can't express your feelings. And let me just not say our community, just within my household. And I found it to be with other African Americans as well. Once I started opening up, they were like, yeah, this is happening to me. And then we got more towards South Texas and San Benito and Harlingen. And then they started opening up and saying, yeah, this was in our household too. We couldn't express, anything. So that's how I relate to it.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing. I do believe that was helpful and enlightening. Continuing on, what is your definition of trauma and how do you see it represented in communities like Fifth Ward?
Yeah, trauma occurs when any situation, whether it's environmental, it's something caused by another person, it's a war. It affects our abilities to regulate our emotions and how we respond. And a lot of times it's not always the event itself, but it's what occurred after, who helped us, who supported us through it. Did anyone hear us? Did anyone listen to us? And when trauma is reflected into the community, a lot of times that can come out as aggression. It can be lack of trust, like you were saying, with just not wanting to air out your dirty laundry. That's a very common saying in the Mexican community. Just don't tell people about what's going on in your household. And there's also a lack of empathy, again, with, well, we're going through it too, or, well, we've been through worse. You just got to deal with it, get over it. Because it's like we all have our own stuff that we're going through. We don't really have the space to hold space for someone else. We just don't have that emotional capacity. And then also it shows up a lot in our physical health. Do we have high blood pressure? Are we experiencing a lot of stress, a low immune system? Maybe we're getting sick a lot, or we're tired all the time and we don't understand why. And that can be trauma.
Yeah, I think for me, I would describe it as a lasting negative impact on our mind and our body that can be following an event that directly happened to us or indirectly. Typically, those are situations where we felt helpless, we felt powerless, we felt trapped. And so because of that, then there's different ways that we may have learned to respond to the trauma. I think some people have heard of like fight, flight, or freeze, right? And so there's another one called fawning. And so these are different ways that people have learned to survive to get through what that traumatic event has been for them. What it can look like in the community, it can look like substance abuse, it can look like violence, it can look like poverty, it can look like our health concerns that Amanda was just talking about. So a lot of times in communities of color, we're disproportionately more at risk of heart disease, of high blood pressure, and different things like that. A lot of it can come from environmental, but also just the stresses and the impact that it has on our body of just trying to survive and not always having the adequate skills, the resources, or the support systems that we need to be able to move through. But I think it's important to understand that what may be considered traumatic for one person may not be traumatic for someone else, which is why we kind of have moved away from saying trauma isn't about an event. So, based on my protective factors, based on my risk factors, can make a difference on how I respond to an event that may make it more traumatic or less traumatic for me.
And I was going to say pretty much what she just said. So I'm not going to repeat it. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for your honesty. That helps us move forward. So our next question here, what are the struggles or obstacles that keeps us from healing? This could be individually or as a community.
The knowledge of what is trauma and how do we heal from it? What does it look like? A lot of times we are experiencing trauma and we're living through it, but we don't see it as that. We see it as like, oh, it's just the daily grind, or I'm just tired from all of this. And also our own inner critic. You know, a lot of people have heard that, oh, you're your own worst enemy. And we really are. We talk to ourselves. We tend to beat ourselves up over things. So if we're maybe not doing what we need to do or what we feel like we need to do, we're beating ourselves up over that instead of looking to see, well, why is it that I'm so tired? Why is it that I'm hurting? Why is it that I feel this way? And then, of course, there's financial barriers and wanting to find people who look like us to provide our care. So being able to know, okay, well, where do I look to find someone who looks like me? Where do I find these counselors? Maybe that's going to be off of Mental Health Match, therapy for Black girls. Maybe it's going to be Latinx therapy, but like just knowing where to look. A lot of us don't have that.
I think that there's obstacles in two different veins. Individually, the things that stop us from healing, and then systemically what that looks like. So personally, I think there's shame, guilt, embarrassment sometimes about what has happened to us. And it's not necessarily that we don't want to heal, but that can prevent us from being able to ask for help. Right? Because typically that means I have to tell somebody about what happened to me. And if I'm carrying all of these feelings, I don't want to do that. Right? So a lot of people walk around suffering in silence when they don't necessarily have to. Also, I think what Amanda was alluding to earlier is what's called comparative suffering. Right. So when we invalidate our own experiences, trying to compare it to someone else. So for instance, if I say, well, if I think about what my ancestors, you know, who were enslaved went through, right, what do I have to complain about? Well, those are two very different traumas. Those are two very different situations. So both things can be true, right? Yes, they had a very traumatic experience that is lasting, right, hundreds of years later. And whatever I'm going through or have experienced in this moment, it can also be equally as traumatizing for me. It doesn't have to be the same, because in doing that, we invalidate our experiences, right? And then say, whatever I'm going through isn't warranted for me to feel this way or to have this impact that it's having on me. I think obstacles, whether it's organizationally or systemically, could be just the lack of access of treatment, period. And so sometimes resources are there, but we may not actually be able to access them, whether it's by finances, transportation. Let's say everything is virtual, but I don't have the privacy, right, to be able to have a confidential therapy session. Maybe I don't have stable internet. Maybe I'm having to share electronic device in the household. So I think there's different obstacles, but definitely I think personally, if we're carrying this shame, this guilt about it, that can prevent us from even being able to ask for help.
And with me, I'm just going to go with my personal experience. What kept me from healing the first time when someone close to me took their life was because of, I guess, my upgrowings. We always saw like, oh, if something that traumatic happens, pray. Don't speak to someone professionally. And to me, to get that kind of response or, information, especially like from a parent or a teacher or somebody that you look up to, I took it as signs of being weak, like Camilla was saying, the embarrassment or the guilt that I was holding on to. So when it happened the second time, it was actually one of my pastors that told me, hey, it's okay to get professional help. Like, it's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign. So I instilled that within my students at the campuses that we have chapters on, like, it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay in that struggle by yourself. And we do provide resources and, opportunities, because as Camilla and Amanda just mentioned about them not knowing of the resources. And every time when we do open up and offer saying, hey, we offer XYZ, they're like, oh, I didn't know this was out there. So I think that was like one of the obstacles as well. So thank you.
Ashley, if I can add something, I also would probably say our unhealthy or maladaptive ways of trying to cope on our own, right? By just trying to avoid the situation or suppressing the feelings, sometimes just straight up deny, like, no, that didn't happen, right? We'll rationalize it and call it something else. Sometimes people may normalize the situation, especially if they feel like, well, it didn't just happen to me. I know 5 other people that it happened to. And that may have been true, and everybody has experienced, something traumatic. So I just wanted to kind of add those other things that may get in the way when people are trying to do their best to move forward or not have to relive the experience. Sometimes we can do that in unhealthy ways that in the moment or temporarily it may feel better, but long term we know that whatever we keep suppressing, whatever we don't address, is going to keep coming up and resurfacing. And a lot of times it gets louder and louder. It gets more and more challenging until we actually deal with it.
Or snap. So yeah. That was deep.
So I just wanted to remind you all to please take any time to chat amongst yourselves or continue the discussion even before we move on to a next question, just like we just did. So this next question does have a follow-up question. So what are 2 ways that we can cope or overcome the challenges that we face?
Yeah, and along those same lines is challenging the narrative, figuring out, well, where are these thoughts coming from? Is this, for example, is this something that I'm telling myself? Is this something that maybe society is telling me I should feel this way or I should believe this thing? Maybe it's the patriarchy, but really figuring out, where is this thought coming from and can I free myself from this concept? If this is a thought that's coming from within me, let me work on that. Let me figure out let me reflect on that and see where I can change or think differently. If it's coming from someone else, if this is something that maybe a parent has told me or just someone in my life, then I can let that go, because that doesn't make it true. That doesn't mean it's real. So really just understanding where those thoughts are coming from. And for many of us, it's coming from the patriarchy. It's coming from something that society has told us that we need to do. And then also finding your community, whether that's through church, maybe it's your friends from college, or maybe finding a community circle where you can share and be supportive. But being able to talk to someone that you trust and get that off of your chest, whether it's someone professional or maybe you just have a group of friends or family members that you're able to talk about things with. And also being mindful that we're not dropping all of our trauma on just one person alone, but we're sharing in our experiences, because it becomes a lot easier when we realize that I'm not the only one that's going through this. Someone else is, and maybe they have ideas for how I can handle this. There's the goods and bad part of normalization, of normalizing something. We know that we're not the only ones to experience it. And then it's either our step to, do we end the cycle here? Or am I going to normalize it as well and think that, well, this has happened to everyone else, or this happens to all these other people, so I guess it's okay for me to feel this way. And a lot of times it happens just because we don't realize that I don't have to feel this way. I don't have to go through this. And neither did the people in my family, and figuring out, where can I do something different? And you might not know until you talk to people what that difference is or how someone else is handling that.
I'm gonna add a third thing. But I think one is figuring out what it is that you need to release, what the release looks like, right? Because a lot of times something has happened to us and we're just holding it. We're holding it, we're holding it, we're holding it. And then as Cinda said, it seeps out literally through our behaviors, through our thoughts, through the ways that we feel in our body. So figuring out what that release looks like. As a therapist, I'm always going to promote therapy, right? And I'm also a therapist who has a therapist and who has been to therapy. And, you know, I've had a sexual assault, a physical assault, a very traumatic miscarriage. And so those things are not about how I think about the situation. Those things actually happened. And, you know, I was a victim in that. So I think it's really therapy has been a tool to one, be able to help me understand what happened, also to be able to understand my response to it in full transparency. In two of the instances, I froze. And for people who know me, like that's probably a little bit more of a fighter, right? And so because of how I responded to the traumatic event, that caused a lot of emotional distress too. Like, why didn't I fight back? Why didn't, you know, all of these things? And so therapy really helped me understand one about fawning, right? And really about what freezing really looks like. That when you're going through a situation, your mind and your body is quickly trying to assess, what do I need to do to survive and get out of this situation, right? When I'm scanning the environment, can I say, is this the situation where I feel like I can fight, right? I can fight off my oppressor, whoever it is. Do I feel like I'm not gonna fight, so I gotta run, right, for safety? Doesn't mean I freeze and I just kind of disassociate, right? Because running and staying isn't going to help. Or do I fawn, right? Where people kind of can come into more people please, and what do I need to happen to make this as like painless as possible? What I need to do is to just like get through this. Maybe if I do this, he won't beat me. Maybe if I do this, right, it won't be as bad as the next time. And so therapy can really help you understand all of those things. It can help you understand what PTSD looks like, right? Because typically what happens is the trauma, the threat is no longer there because it's happened already. But in the present, our mind and our body is still responding to new situations as if we're in the past. So that's why you typically have people who kind of overreact to certain situations, right? Because the threat in reality, right, may not be as big as what it seems for that person based on their experiences that they've happened. Or the opposite can happen. People can come very withdrawn, again, like people pleasing, very poor boundaries, because that was a way that they learned how to cope from traumatic experiences. Therapy can also help you with forgiveness, if that's part of it, whether it's forgiveness for self or forgiveness for the other person. And forgiveness does not mean that what they did or said is okay. It's about the personal releasing of all of those emotions so you can move forward, right? So we don't have like this emotional baggage or this emotional change from what has happened. So figuring out a way to release. We know that therapy is not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. So whether it's tapping into your spirituality and whatever that looks like, if it's journaling, if it's dancing, if it's, you know, writing, whatever that looks like, but finding a way to be able to release it so it's not continuing to hold you and weigh you down. And I think the other thing was just be really assessing where you are and are you surviving or are you thriving? Right. And so figuring out where you are and so what do I need to be able to move from survivor mode to thriving mode? And who are the people that I need to be able to help me get there?
Right. And for me, because we work with a lot of youth, we do force, and when I say force, we force them to speak to someone that's a professional, a therapist, a counselor, psychologist, whatever. We also encourage them to tap into their talents, what they're good at. For an example, I had one student, he always liked to fight. And I'm like, why do I have, and he's a great student, like super intelligent, but one little thing would trigger him and he fights all the time. So me and his dad, and his auntie, we put him into boxing. Like, we got him therapy because we noticed that when he was living with his aunt and his uncle would always fight his aunt. And that was the anger that he was expressing through fighting, because as a younger guy, he expressed to me like he just felt like he couldn't help her when he wanted to. But after we put him into boxing, like, a complete 180, like, he is a total different kid, but he loves it. He's able to release that anger, that energy, on the kickboxing, whatever, ring. And he's great at school now. Like, he challenges it in the ring. So once he gets to school, it's just like, oh, okay. And he's learning what he's giving, what he learned in therapy at school. So just being able to find, like Camilla said, what you're good at, whether it's dancing or painting, or, for our students that's in the STEM, science, math, just something, giving them like opportunities, going to NASA and meeting people and doing different events or different projects there. So yeah, that's what we do. And we also face with like a lot of our students, they would cope differently in a negative aspect as far as like cutting or eating disorder or something. So again, we force them to talk to a professional, and then we'll change it to something that they're interested in.
So what Sine was describing was almost like a perfect example of what we're talking about. So what I heard her say was that for this 14-year-old kid, he witnessed indirect trauma, right? He wasn't necessarily being traumatized, but that was what he saw. He also saw that physical, like fighting, was a way to express yourself, right? Or when I get upset, this is an acceptable way to be able to express that. And then remember, going back to trauma can be described as a lasting negative impact on our brain and body in situations where we feel trapped and powerless and out of control. Right. He wanted to help his aunt, right? But he felt trapped and powerless. Right. So when he gets overwhelmed, he goes to fighting, which was what he saw. And so by putting him in boxing, football, sometimes we'll see, with boys, is a way to still be able to channel those emotions, but in a healthier way, right? In a way where that type of physical interaction is more socially acceptable.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and just to add to that, when we are experiencing like high levels of stress and anxiety, or maybe trauma, we have a really hard time accessing our frontal lobe, and that is all about language and expression. So when we get to a point where we're just like really overwhelmed, we might not be able to tell you how we're feeling or what we're experiencing. So yeah, reacting with violence, if that's easier for us, that's something that we know. That's a lot easier than saying, I'm ashamed of myself, or I'm really disappointed. So understanding too that when our emotions are out of control, it might be really hard for someone to tell you why that is or what's going on through their brain. So giving them the space to just like breathe and calm down, or if there's a safe way for them to let out their frustrations through, maybe it's kickboxing, or maybe there's a punching bag, or whatever that is, but allowing that person to get it out just so they can take all of this energy that they're feeling, and there's a place for it to go.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that you all spoke about the importance of having a safe space, a safe activity to channel your emotions, or even a safe group of people. So our follow-up question here is, how can we trust, and who can we trust after injustice or some type of traumatic event?
Yeah, that's a really tough one, because it's hard to tell people who they can trust or how you can trust, because we don't know if one of those people has hurt them in the past. We're not sure who is a safe person for them. So maybe starting off with, is there anyone that they do trust? And what about them do they trust? What characteristics do they have? What kind of qualities do they have? And then it also takes me back to, if we're in a space of a collective trauma. Mr. Rogers, he says, find the helpers and go to them. So figuring out who are the helpers in your community, who are the people that are looking to help and looking to support me. So finding out, when I say something to someone, are they hearing me? Are they validating what I'm saying? Are they making me feel good and making me feel heard? So finding out who that is for you, and also thinking about, what is keeping me from trusting? What experiences have broken my trust in the past? And this could be something that happened to us from way back when we were little. Maybe there's been many situations where a trust has been broken and we just feel like, I can't trust anybody. I only can rely on myself. And if that's the case, then asking ourselves, well, what is it that I can let go of? What is it that I don't have to be so hyper independent. I don't have to just rely on myself. There's someone else maybe that's in my immediate family. Maybe it's outside of that. Maybe it's someone in my community who I can just go to talk, or maybe let go of some of these experiences that I'm holding on to. And maybe that's also going to be within our larger community, like the city of Houston. Maybe it's looking for those sports groups. There's the city of Houston has sports teams, so does Houston Sports and Social, Sports Monkeys, things like that. But that's a good way to go and get out your extra energy, whether it's frustration, stress, whatever, and then just having a group of people that you can talk to.
I would say trust yourself first, because you survived. You survived what has killed some people. So trust yourself that you can heal, because you already made it through the tough part already. Second, I would say, similar to what Amanda was saying, go back to the people who've already earned your trust, right? Start with the people that you know. And also think about people who may have already opened up and been vulnerable and shared a similar experience, where you feel like you can go to them to seek some support. And the last I would say is professionals, because that's what we're trying to do, whether it's different treatment modalities, confidentiality, also just having a wealth of other community resources at our fingertips. But for definitely professionals, because I think even though most well-intentioned people can say or do things that can cause additional hurt or trauma, and it can come with biases, it can come with stereotypes. And sometimes people can only help you to the most that they know how to help themselves, right? And so we just kind of have to be mindful of that. But kind of opening up and being vulnerable about what has happened to us can be very scary. And so I would just say that vulnerability comes with boundaries, right? Kind of test it out. Give people a little bit to see how they respond before you just kind of really open up and share. Because trust is something that has to be earned and developed, even with professionals and with people who are close to us. So don't feel like in order to heal or start the conversation, you just kind of have to jump all in. It could be like, hey, did you hear this story? Or did you see this movie on Netflix? Right? Like kind of asking for a friend, right? And just kind of see how they respond to that first.
And I agree with you 100%. I can't just say who to trust, because trust can be broken, right? So I would agree definitely with a professional, because if that trust is broken, at least it's a contract at it that you can sue at the end of the day. So I would start there. And the only reason why I'm saying it, because I've seen so many like events that even when someone went to a pastor, like something happened with breaking the trust and the whole church knew about it. And that's devastating. And that happened to one of my friends at a church I used to go to. And then with the schools, you don't know who you can trust there or at work or, in your friend group. So start with professionals. And just like Camilla said, gradually say things to see how people respond in your friend group. And then if you don't see it getting out or leaking that way, add on to that friend, knowing that, okay, my secrets or, my deepest experiences stays with us. So I will say pretty much what Camilla said as far as like definitely doing the professional route first and then gradually seeing who you can trust.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. How does inward healing affect our environment or our communities?
Yes, when we heal, we're ending the cycle in our own family, in our own, maybe not our outward community at first, but if enough of us do it, then we start to see the changes happening in our community. Um, they say when one person is in therapy, the whole family is, because that one person is learning to set boundaries. They're learning what they are okay with and how to communicate and how to say yes, how to say no. And we learn how to express our emotions and our feelings. And so do the people around us, because we also start to say, like, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with the way that you're talking to me or treating me. We're also able to say, I am not in a space to listen to this or to hear this right now. But you start to become aware of what you are okay with and what you're not. And people around you start noticing that, and they may react well, or they may not be very happy with that because they're not used to having boundaries in place. So that person hopefully begins to learn boundaries, and the people around us start to say, you know what, I don't have to say yes to everything. I can say no. I don't have to put up with this. It's within my right to not have to do that. But we're just able to have more trust in the community. Maybe we are going to recommend therapy to more people because it really helped us. So, you know what? I'm normalizing therapy in my household, and it starts to spread beyond your household to your group of friends. And then, it just has a much larger impact than even you would realize. Um, yeah, so I think inward healing, it affects who we are and what we're able to do. The more that we are healed, the more confidence that we have in ourselves, the more trust that we have in ourselves, the more we're going to go out and make a difference and believe that we can.
Well, I think inward healing is not just optional, it's necessary, because hurt people intentionally or unintentionally, right? And so I think when we do that on work, every single day we're interacting with people. So when I work on me first, my communication skills improve, right? I'm able to regulate my emotions. I'm not doing things, again, intentionally or unintentionally, to abuse people, to neglect others' needs. You can show up differently in your relationship. So when you're procreating, you're trying to build a life and experiences with other people, those can be more pleasurable. So I think one thing to remember is that just as generational trauma can be passed down, so can generational healing. Because really what it is just a representation of what we've been taught, what we've been exposed to, and what has been deemed okay or not okay. So I think when we're talking about trauma, I don't want to say that it's normal, it's prevalent, right? Just meaning that it's happening a lot and to a lot of different people. To normalize it, I think then almost makes it says like, okay, well, it happened to you. Like, what's the big deal? That part we don't want to do, right? But it's prevalent. And so when we can heal that, then sometimes it means we're holding people accountable, right? Because in some communities in certain seasons or years ago, domestic violence was okay, right? Like people knew it was occurring, but no one was calling the law enforcement, right? No one was intervening. It was just like, okay, girl, like, me too. I hope you make it through the night, right? Whereas now with education, with people saying like this is not okay with me, working through different situations, now people can be held accountable, and hopefully those incidents can decrease.
That was good. Yes. So the how it can affect the community is, as far as like the both of you just said, once you start working on yourself, then everyone in your circle follows, everyone in their circle follows, everyone in their circle. Is just a ripple effect, right? So I've noticed when we were doing the research and development phase for the organization at one of our schools, the principal got us into all of HISD only because she was like, oh my gosh, like since we've had this organization on campus, like it's been less fights. Like our students, they communicate with each other more. They're more kind. They're more aware of situations that can lead to, violence or harmful events. So they speak up. And she said we needed this like a long time ago. And I've noticed like it just a few of those students that was in our chapter impacted the whole school just by showing or leading by example, let me say, and showing what can be done differently or how you can respond, conflict resolution stuff. So yeah, that would be my answer as far as just one person can heal, their circle, and then their circle can heal their circle, the ripple effect.
Perfect. Each of you shared some great examples and analogies. So just to push the subject a little further, what are some services that we have in different communities or that we need to produce a healing environment?
Yeah, so having community resources, like free spaces that people can go to and hang out and talk, like libraries, churches, anywhere else that's considered a safe space, which we don't have as much as we used to have. Back then, there was a lot of places where you could go. There was a town hall, there's, the main city center, and you can go, you can meet your neighbors, hang out. We don't really have that anymore. So one of those places is a bar where you drink, and if that's not your thing, then, and you also don't want to be going out every night just to spend money, drink, and talk to people. So having resources like that, having low cost or sliding scale therapy in your area, or being able to have access to it through maybe a telehealth, having things like food pantries, but systems in place where if we need services, our community's got our back. We can go here if we need food. Maybe there's social workers nearby that can help connect us to different community resources, and now we know where to go. But maybe even I know Houston has the Blue Book, where you can go in and you can find all the resources for your community, whether that's I'm looking for low cost services, I'm looking for food pantries, or a place that can help me, mental health care. So you can go and look up this Blue Book and it has all the services there. So even something like that is very helpful.
Yeah, in regards to therapy, there definitely are some free and low cost options. There's a couple of organizations that offer therapy scholarship funds where you just apply and they typically give you on average about 4 sessions that they're willing to pay for. So my group practice, KBT Counseling Consultant, we are recipients of the Loveland Foundation therapy vouchers and the Boris Henson, which is Taraji P. Henson's foundation. So we've been able to serve clients that way. Others will be through your insurance and EAP. So for people who do have health benefits, whether it's through the marketplace or through their employer, definitely reach out to your HR representative to just ask about your mental health benefits. You may be able to have sessions through there, whether it's a low copay, or there's also EAP, which stands for Employee Assistance Program, where your employer will pay for a certain amount of sessions for you. And I've seen that range from about 3 to 10 sessions. This is through a third party, so your employer is not going to know that you're accessing those services. They're not going to know that you're in therapy. It is completely separate. It is just a benefit that they offer to their employees. And again, if you go through EAP, those are free therapy sessions for typically you and your immediate family members. So I would say those are some free ones. Also, I would say, again, because stress and trauma also impacts our body. So again, if you have health insurance, make sure that you're utilizing the free preventative health screenings that you get, right? So if that means going once a year for your annual physical, every 6 months for your teeth to get cleaned, there's different things like that that we can do to just make sure that physically we are taking care of ourselves. That also impacts our mental health as well.
And with me, I would say, yes, try to find like free therapy resources. I know our organization, we're able to offer it now through, for our students. That's a part of the organization that are, ambassadors for the organization. Also, events or panels like this. Like if you see a mental health panel or something with helping you heal or something that's allowing you to, think outside the box, definitely sign up, take the hour, take the course. You never know what you're going to learn. You never know who you're going to meet. Also, what we do is go to the city hall or town hall meetings through the city. Like I'm in Missouri City. I do the Missouri City one. I do the Sugar Land. I do Houston. I do pretty much every council meeting that our students are infected or a part of. Even down in San Benito and Harlingen, like we go there every other month. We meet with the mayors. We are seeing what they're offering for the city so we can relay the message to our schools, our parents, our students. So definitely hop on things like, or go to events that have like panels with mental health relations. You'll see them a lot in May, September, even for if you have kids. October is a big month as well because that's anti-bullying. So just look at the months and see, oh, okay, what is our community offering?
I will also just like to add some book recommendations as well. So there is an unapologetic guide to Black mental health that's really, really good. There's also My Grandmother's Hands. There is You Are Your Best Self, and another one is What Happened to You. So those are some book recommendations that can help people just understand trauma and the impact that it has and how to heal.
Camilla, do you mind sharing those book recommendations one more time, either in the chat or verbally? We would appreciate that.
Sure. The first is My Grandmother's Hands.
Okay.
And all of these also can be found on Amazon.
Perfect.
What Happened to You.
Mhm.
You are your best self. The unapologetic guide to Black mental health. And the last one was The Body Keeps the Score. That one is, the first half is a little heavy. It talks a lot about how trauma impacts the brain and our nervous systems. But probably about halfway through is the second half, where then it kind of helps you more about the healing, to really pay attention to how trauma shows up in your body, how to pay attention to it, and then what you can do instead.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Denise, as well. So we are approaching our last question, but I do want to take this time to remind our audience that our panelists are available for Q&A. So please feel free to begin inserting your questions into the chat so that we can be prepared for that time. Okay, so our last question: what steps can we take today towards healing?
Finding your community, your friends, your family, people who support you. If you can afford therapy, go to therapy, look for sliding places that are sliding scale, which at Ajana, each therapist has 2 sliding scale spots. And then we also have graduate students that work on a sliding scale fee, I believe from $20 to $60. And we also have 2 donation-based groups. One of them being Guanpani Cafe, that's geared towards Latinas, and we talk about mental health and what it looks like in our community and how it affects us. And then we have the Ajana Community Circle, and that's a place to really just do your inner work and hold yourself accountable by setting intentions and learning different coping skills and therapeutic techniques. Also just talking about mental health with the people that you trust and normalizing it and your feelings through journaling or talking it out. If you can afford therapy, but maybe you have a group of friends who are all want to do the work, then maybe you can do a workbook together, like the self-compassion workbook. Something else that some other books that I really recommend are Codependent No More. And there's also a newer version of that called The New Codependency. I'll Quit Tomorrow. That's a really good one if you or anyone in your family is suffering from addictions. It's helpful to understand what that person is going through and what that looks like, because that also removes a lot of, I did this is my fault, when it's not our fault. And also, if there's any women's groups near you or men's groups or just community groups in general, finding that. Something that I founded is Yogona's Yoga, so yoga for chingonas. So it's more than just yoga. It's also about having the women's circles, having a place to communicate and do the other parts of yoga that a lot of times we forget about. It's not just the physical practice, it's the mental practice, and it's being able to do your inner work.
I would say the first step to this is just understanding that it's okay not to be okay. That life can be hard. And part of the human experience is that, unfortunately, all of us are going to experience some type of trauma. And so while that may be inevitable, we don't have to suffer, right? The suffering can be a choice when the trauma may not have been, right? Suffering is when we choose not to do anything and we just sit in it and just allow it just to impact us and steal our joy, steal our happiness, steal all of that from us, from something that has passed, or the person who did it is long gone and dead or hasn't even, thought about us, right? So I think that's the first part. The second I would say is to be cognizant of any unhealthy habits you've developed. And sometimes it could be our own self-sabotage, or what I call dysfunctional comfort, where we've just learned how to operate in the chaos. We've learned how to operate in the pain. And so that then has become our new normal, or just comfortable. And sometimes we may not feel that healing is possible. We may not know, it's like, could I ever be happy? Could I ever go back to just having a good night's rest? Can I ever go back to not feeling on edge, right? And really just being able to relax and enjoy life and have fun and play, right? So being able to identify those things, because the thing about change is a lot of times we have to hurt bad enough, right, to really be able to do the work necessary to change. And I like to describe trauma as almost like a physical injury, where something has hurt us, and depending on how bad it hurts, we may like shrug it off, or we'll try to, self-diagnose, self-medicate, oh, it doesn't bother me. But then over time, right, typically if we don't address it, it hurts more and more and more. And now I can't function the way that I used to, right? And so we may say, doggone it, by the time I finally go to a professional, by the time I choose to do something, or say that all the ways that I've tried to work through this situation aren't helping, doesn't mean that healing isn't possible. But sometimes it's like, now you need surgery. But if you would have come 6 months ago, 5 years ago, it could have been a little outpatient, procedure, right? And so it's like, well, healing is possible, but now it may take longer. It may be more intense because I waited so long, and the damage that this injury, that this trauma has caused is so much greater, right? And then again, it's just about that quality of work that we're willing to put in. So I think it's really just understanding that it's something that, unfortunately, just like grief, we're all going to experience. It's prevalent, doesn't necessarily mean that it's normal, but typically, whatever it is that we've experienced, we are not and have not been the only person who has experienced it, which means that the likelihood of hope of healing is greater, right? Because other people have gone through that. And if other people have, then I can as well, right? And that typically means that there's going to be resources out there, there's going to be information, there's going to be somebody that can help me, so I don't have to do this alone and by myself. Right. But what I know is that this pain of staying here, this suffering in silence, is keep ignoring it because I ain't got the time, or if it's too hard, it's gonna keep following me until I deal with it. So I think those are some of the first steps, just really being honest about where we are. It is okay to not be okay, that help is there. And sometimes we just have to ask for it. Once we ask for it, then sometimes there can be somebody that says, I may not be able to help, but I know somebody, right? Or, you know what, I just saw something on TikTok, or I just saw something that, came across Google that could be a really great resource. But if we don't say anything, then it makes help a lot harder.
And I totally agree 100%. The first step would be knowing that you need to heal, right? Knowing that something's happened, that I'm not okay. Next, definitely getting professional help. And doing the work. Like, don't just have a pity party saying, oh, this happened to me, I can't do this. It's always resources out there. Whether you can afford it, you can't afford it, it's always something out there that you can research, whether it's counseling through church, that's free. Community counseling, most of the time, like Dr. Camilla said, they have vouchers, they have sponsorships. Organizations like myself, we offer free counseling through our members, through our ambassadors. So it's always something, as long as you're willing to put in the work and really just find the resources and going to go get the help. That's the steps of healing.
One of the things I'll just say is that sometimes we may recognize we need help, but we really are not ready, and that is okay, right? Because anytime we're trying to force ourselves to do something we're not ready for, it can be sometimes more traumatic. So I think being able to recognize, let's say you're having relationship issues and you may be self-aware enough to know that it comes from some childhood things or some strained dysfunctional relationships with your parents. But let's say you're not ready to talk about it. That's okay, but just understand that these things may continue to show up until I deal with that, right? So that way you're not like pressuring yourself to work on something you're not ready for, but you're also aware that some of these things are coming up because of something else, right? So that way we don't feel like, I don't know what's happening or I don't know what's going on. No, I do. I'm just not ready yet.
Well, thank you, Amanda, Camilla, and Sine. It has been a pleasure hosting you all as our panelists. I don't know about everyone else, but I feel amazing just receiving all the information that you all shared today, the analogies, the examples, your personal experiences, and the different resources that you've all shared as well. I am going to go ahead and pass the baton to Ms. Denise so that she can close us out with some Q&A.
Yes. Hey, everyone. So thank you so much for listening to that conversation. We're definitely available to take some Q&A. And so you can raise your hand if you like and ask a question, or if there's anything else that our panelists today wanted to close with. We're open to hearing. And then in the chat, I have put all of the bios and descriptions for our panelists today. We also have a resource guide that I'll be posting as well, so you can check in. Let me see. All righty. And I posted it in the chat as well. Yes. So I would just word of advice, check in your communities, see everything that's happening in your communities. There is a yoga that is for free. There is Zumba. Sometimes there's talking circles and healing circles. That's actually how I found Amanda. It was through one of their cafecito, I think, talks. And I was like, I know the perfect person for this. Researching and finding Camila. In Sine, I was part of their Society of Royals board, but also participated in their mental health awareness walks that usually happen around November. And so just be aware of the things that are happening in your environment and how they're affecting you, and realize that you do have the power to make change within yourself and in your communities. And so you're a direct reflection of what you're pouring into yourselves. But thank you so much for coming to today's discussion. If you don't have anything for our panelists today, we do want to thank you for participating in today's discussion. I have recorded it and I will be posting it online. Thank y'all. Have a great day.